Rogue Tulips Consulting presents its weekly podcast. We started out as chatting with Agnes and Cecilia, and then we evolved to nonprofit conversations to our current brand, Radio Free 501c. This week, we are here with our special guest host, Michael Butera of Association Activision, and our special guest, me, your host, Cecilia Sapp. Welcome, it's June 19th, and it's time for our 200th episode. Hey everybody, it's Monday, June 19th, and that means it's time for another episode of Radio Free 501c. I'm Cecilia Sapp. I'm a certified association executive and a certified nonprofit professional, and this is what we've been talking about for weeks, the 200th episode. So thanks for joining us and listening. This episode, we're doing it a little different. I'm going to be the guest, and I have a great guest host, my friend and colleague, Michael Butera of Association Activision, who also is the host of his own podcast, the Association Future Podcast. So let me throw it over to Michael and let him take over.
Well, thank you very much, Cecilia. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and thank you for being a guest on your own show.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. I thought we'd have a little bit of fun as well as a little bit of seriousness here today. So we'll start out with the serious part here. And that is, you've done this now since April of 2019, as I recall. And that means it's gone through a couple iterations. I think you started out with chatting with Agnes and Cecilia. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah, and then you also do Executive Spotlight, where you help tons of people, which is really wonderful. And now 501c3 Radio, or Radio Free 501c. I got to get it right. Okay. So why couldn't you find a name?
Well, actually, like individuals, our programs change, their identity changes and how we present. So it's really kind of fun. The original show, when my friend Agnes Amos Coleman, who's a certified meeting planner, was the co-host with me, we launched the show together because we used to have these long, deep conversations. And I finally said to her one day, you know, Agnes, we should record these and share them with the world because we say some pretty interesting things. And that's how Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia was born. But then time changes, life changes, friends go in different directions. But Agnes had a lot of life changes. She decided to leave consulting and go back to full-time employment, which is great, totally respect. She also became a full-time mom, in addition to trying to work full-time. So she said, it's time for me to move on, and I can't dedicate the time to the podcast that I used to. So that's when it became Nonprofit Conversations, because Agnes had to leave. So there's no more Agnes. So I can't talk to Agnes anymore, at least on the show. So then it was Nonprofit Conversations. And then a lot of people may not realize this, but Radio Free 501c was part of our brand all along, because that is the name of the blog on the 501c League website. And the 501c League also has had an evolution. That's now an education program for nonprofit management professionals. But originally, the 501c League was a membership group. It was an experiment I ran to see if we could create a virtual membership association for nonprofit professionals. And so we called the blog Radio Free 501c. So we moved it over. Also, I wanted to stand out a little bit more in the podcast crowd.
Well, I know you love history, and I know you love quotes. So I was wondering if you have a quote that you think is apt in terms of the Radio Free 501c podcast.
So that is a great question. I do love quotes, and you once gave me a book of quotes for a Christmas gift, which I always appreciated and still refer back to. But Radio Free 501c, I try to be a different voice. I try not to promote the conventional wisdom. And I'm also a fan of Ayn Rand. As you and I have talked about, I'm a libertarian. I actually joined the Libertarian Party in the last election, having never joined a political party in my life before. But I also like the philosophy of objectivism. And so Ayn Rand has all kinds of quotes. And so One of my favorite quotes from Ayn Rand is, "It's not who's going to let me, it's who's going to stop me." And so I would say that quote for Radio Free 501c, because you cannot stop my voice. I'm not going to let anybody tell me.
Yeah, one of the things I like about you is you're not afraid to say what's on your mind.
Curse
So,
it being from Missouri, I must say.
if you had an opportunity to, interview any famous person that you can think of for your podcast, who would that be?
Well, actually, I'm going to go with a living person because recently somebody asked in an online community I belong to, who would you interview, living or dead? But I actually have invited Richard Dreyfuss to be on the podcast because he has a nonprofit organization that is advocating civil discourse. And I think that's really important. He's also pointed out in the past, when I've seen him in other interviews on news shows, that we don't talk long enough about things. We do these 2 or 3 minute bites on the news shows, and it's not enough. We don't do enough digging into a topic and really seeing the different sides. So, Richard Dreyfuss, if you're listening, I have sent you an invitation through your website. I am waiting to hear back.
That'd be one hell of an interview, I must say. Yeah. Hey, look, speaking of people on your broadcast, I was wondering if the dogs have ever decided they want to be on.
Have they have lobbied relentlessly to be on the show. They sometimes video bomb it for the video version. We do a video version and an audio version, and they sometimes will pop up. They also pop up in my courses from time to time when we're teaching the content for the CAE exam or leading a study group. They're in there. They're very vocal. One of the issues, though, is I don't speak miniature pincher, and I have yet to find a good interpreter for them. So they have not been able to be on the show yet.
And I assume they're not certified association execs.
They are not, but they are definitely certified Canine Protection League. I can give you that.
Hey, there's a marvelous amount of new technology around. By any chance, are you worried about what Chat GPT and those things might do to the podcast, or quite frankly, to the association community?
I love that question. Thank you for asking that. For those of you who regularly read the blog, and I know Michael does because he kindly will comment on it from time to time, I've written several blog articles about artificial intelligence. And one of the things about artificial intelligence tools, ChatGPT is a tool of artificial intelligence, just like Google Bard or OpenAI, although most people in the nonprofit community are talking about ChatGPT, but they're all tools that do basically the same thing. So what these artificial intelligence AI things do is they go out and they review the sum of human knowledge very quickly, and they come back with what they find. So they are artificial, but they are not intelligent. So I think what they are really good for is research. I think that will actually help the nonprofit profession because we'll be able to do research more quickly. I've been talking to people in networking groups about it, listening to how they use it. And a lot of people use it to do a first draft. Now, the problem is you need to cite that. You need to say, I asked Google Bard this question, which is what I did recently in a report I wrote for a client. I asked a question to Google Bard about the topic, and I said, I asked Google Bard this is what they said. And then I went out and found other sources to support what Google Bard said, because you really do have to double check these things. And I do worry a little bit about the very extreme situation of, could AI end human existence? Could it terminate us? And one of the things I worry about is, having studied a little bit about symbolism in our stories, how we try to teach each other lessons, especially if you look at the work of Carl Jung and archetypes, none of our stories about artificial intelligence end well. So, and I think that's because we've abdicated responsibility for what that tool is doing. You can't let anything loose without monitoring it. And these are tools. They're not thinking. They're not thoughtful. I doubt they will ever become sentient in the way that human beings are sentient. And when you consider that all of this technology is based on the human mind, and how the human mind works, how we think. We think very fast. We don't give ourselves enough credit. We've just made these tools that can research things faster. And I think if we put it in that context and we understand that we can't abdicate our responsibility and we don't abdicate our responsibility, I think AI could be a very powerful tool in a lot of different ways that can help us through all of society.
Very interesting. On a much lighter note, I had to review a bunch of your blooper reels.
Oh, man.
And I always say that now, is there some special blooper reel that Cecilia really likes? Is there something that really caught her, that gave her that special little giggle or something like that?
Oh, so somebody else's blooper reel?
Yeah,
Okay, because I was going to say we only have one official blooper reel.
right.
If anyone wants to check it out, it's just called the blooper reel from November 2020. But blooper reels, I really love watching the blooper reels from comedies, like when you're watching a movie and at the end credits and they show those bloopers of like how they screwed something up. One of my favorite ones, there's this really funny movie I like called Date Night, starring Tina Fey and Steve Carell. And it's about this married couple. They've been married a long time. They kind of think the thrill is gone. And then they go have this really strange night in New York trying to go out to dinner. But they have these great bloopers at the end where Tina Fey is improvising a line over and over again in a restaurant scene where she's trying to guess what these people are thinking. And so she's just, I love improv because I just think it's so funny trying to figure out what is going to be funny and what's not. And she was actually cracking Steve Carell up the entire time. So that's like one of my favorite blooper reels.
It's interesting because this whole idea of interviewing people, you write down all these questions, and then as things move along, you have to say, oh, well, if she said this, maybe I should ask this that isn't on the list. So spontaneity is really important in the ability to do a good interview with somebody. So on a kind of more serious note for a moment, hey, 200 is a lot of broadcasts. It is a lot. I mean, it must mean something special to you as well. What does number 200 really mean to you?
Well, 200 means I can't believe I have been able to keep up with it for this long and do everything else in life. I get asked a lot of questions about the podcast. What 200 means to me is that I have something to look back at and be proud of. I've created a lot of content. People look to it for education, information, inspiration. When I'm just talking with people anecdotally, they say they really enjoy it. They listen to it from time to time. We have a few subscribers, which is always nice. I have currently 165 subscribers on the YouTube channel, and they're all real. So I'm very proud of those 165. I have no follower farm followers. So I'm very proud of that. But what it means to me is my own personal evolution as well, because as you noted at the beginning, the show has evolved and it's now found its true personality, which is Radio Free 501c. It takes time. I have learned a lot. I have expanded my skill set. I've expanded my knowledge set. I've made a lot of great connections. Agnes introduced me to a lot of people in her network. I've expanded my own network. So it means a lot to me. I feel that I have created something of a community of people because I have never had anybody decline an invitation to the podcast, which also makes me feel good. But the added benefit then is that people who've never been on a podcast before have a great experience. And so I think it helps their confidence so that when they go do it again, or maybe they're doing a public speaking engagement, they feel good. They know they can do it.
In addition to the podcast, we've already mentioned this, you have a blog. And I was trying to, so how do you balance those two off? Do you use one for the other? Do you promote one with the other? What's your, objective in the blog versus your objective in the podcast? Or are they really the same?
Well, the objective is the same, although the content is usually not. The objective of both is one, to promote awareness of Rose Tulips Consulting and what we can do at Rose Tulips for our clients. But the podcast tends to be more about a person's specific expertise. So, for example, we had Gwen Donahue on recently from the Pet Advocacy Network, and she was sharing everything she learned creating a new brand for the Pet Advocacy Network. So that focuses more on the guest. The blog is really more focused on me and my opinions and my take on things and what I can share with the world. So I would say that would be the difference. We do the blog post is also the main article in the weekly newsletter as well. And then in the newsletter, we promote the podcast. We also do a separate newsletter alert just about the podcast every week. So I would say what they have in common is content. What differentiates them is one is about sharing someone else's expertise and the other is about sharing mine.
So I don't want to embarrass you by having everybody know that I'm your favorite guest or something like that. But I am interested in not your favorite guest, but are there some that stick out in your mind that really said something special or, were just funny or entertaining or it didn't go like you thought it would?
Well, actually, that is a really good question, and I was thinking about that a little bit before our talk today. Well, first of all, you are one of my favorite guests. For the audience, if you haven't heard, Michael's been on 9 times as a guest, which is why I invited him back for number 10 to be the guest host. Fern Carbonell is close. She also has been on 9 times. So Michael has shared a lot of his expertise on governance and soft skills versus hard skills, which was a conversation I really enjoyed. But some other ones, something unexpected. Rob Miller from Gravitate Solutions was a guest, and we were going to be talking about data dashboards, which we did eventually get to. But Rob and I have a shared love of single malt scotch and travel. So he said, well, I could just talk about that the whole episode. And I said, we could, but I don't know if the audience would be that interested. So that's always, Dean West is always a fun guest because if you've ever spoken with Dean West of Association Laboratory, he's very witty, he's very funny. It's one of the reasons I loved working with Dean for so many years at Association Lab. He was a very fun guest. One of my favorite guests, I have to say, though, as far as content, is Lesedi Leseteti of Botswana Open University. She's been on several times talking about board relationships and board leadership development from the perspective of a board member. And she brings a very different viewpoint. And also having somebody from another country talk is always interesting. Paul Reddish of Volunteering Matters in the United Kingdom has been on. He brings that other perspective. One of the things I have found over the years, though, because we are in season 5, one of the things I have found from talking to people from all over the United States and all over the world is we all have so much more in common than we do not. And so we are currently living in a divided world that doesn't need to be. It's because we're focusing on what's different instead of what we have in common. And we fight over what we think is a difference that really isn't. So I have really had that brought home to me. It was an idea I'd already had most of my life, but then talking to all these different people, I have found it to be true. And I love it. And I just love the fact that around the world, people are really embracing and understanding what a nonprofit can do for their country as well.
It's interesting that you bring this subject up because there is a kind of nastiness that's come into our civil dialogue, and then there is always the argument about, do I always have to be politically correct, whatever that's supposed to mean to somebody. But as you work with your clients and work on the podcast, do you find that in the association community, there's kind of like a soft lingo that's used among the association community that maybe would be beneficial in general society? Or because you're so good at this, how do you get people to be straightforward without being nasty?
That is an excellent question. And I actually recently worked with a client who is trying to calm their board relationships. You cannot have, there is no method, I'm going to say, that will force a person to open their mind and to let go of their resentment. And that's really a key to that. If you want to relax a relationship, you have to leave the resentment in the past. It doesn't mean it didn't happen. It doesn't mean it can't inform how you approach things, but you can't keep bringing it forward. It has to stay in the past. So that's one thing. I think when it comes to soft lingo from nonprofits, we do try to be very sensitive to DEI. I think sometimes, I'll be honest, and please save the angry postcards, because I don't mean this to undermine DEI. I'm a huge supporter of it, but I think we apply it incorrectly in many cases. DEI should not be exclusionary. It should be inclusionary for all. And does it mean we need to open more doors for people who haven't had those doors open? Absolutely, 100%. And we need to continue to do that. But I meet people outside of the nonprofit community who don't even know what DEI means. I was talking to a friend of mine earlier this year who lives in the Midwest, and she works at a huge healthcare system. And I said, well, you guys probably have a DEI policy. And she said, what's DEI? And so I think that is something that we could bring forward as the nonprofit community. But a lingo, I'm going to add on to your question without being asked. If that's
Sure.
okay.
What a surprise.
Exactly. You know me too well. Lingo, I would like to see the nonprofit community cut loose forever, is that's the way we've always done it. That's the way boards are. It's never going to change. What is your group doing so I can just copy it? I'd like to see that go.
So your hometown is, I believe, St. Louis, Missouri. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The show me state. And now, of course, you live in ultra liberal Maryland.
Yeah.
We have a rule regulation and a good note for everybody, and the taxes to go with it. So, do you have a favorite city, not where you live, but a favorite city that you'd like to visit and spend time in and just enjoy yourself with your better half?
Oh my goodness. Wow. There are actually several cities I really enjoy. One that's just really on my mind lately is Budapest, because my better half had to go to Prague for a business meeting recently. And years ago, we went to Budapest and Prague for a vacation. And I really enjoyed Budapest because I found the people in Budapest really friendly and outgoing, and they smile a lot. They're really fun, warm people. I love London because I love history, and the whole city's a museum. Let's face it. I mean, you're walking down the street and there's little stones in the street. And my favorite place on earth, not that you asked, Michael, but I'll tell you anyway, is Westminster Abbey, which is in London. So I love London. I love visiting Canada when I can. Montreal's beautiful, and it's right on the St. Lawrence River. And having grown up in St. Louis, right next to the mighty Mississippi, I love being next to a big river. And so those are some of my favorite cities.
That's great. If you had a chance to recommend a book or two to the association community that you really feel would help them organize and be better at the job they intend to do, I have an idea. I think I know what you might say, but what would that be?
Well, I know you're thinking I'm going to say The Art of War by Sun Tzu, because
That's what
it's
I
one
thought
of my
you'd
favorite
say.
books. I do recommend that one. The Art of War can be difficult if you are trying to read it in between other things. So the other book I recommend a lot that I think would really help, it's called A Spy's Guide to Strategy, and it's written by a former CIA agent. It's very readable. It has real world examples that you can use to apply to any situation, but basically have to think your way out of things. So you always have to be thinking, you always have to be practicing situational awareness, and you always have to be observing environmental factors. So those are some books that I really like. Other books that I think are very helpful just for our own personal development is the Tao Te Ching. Has a lot of great information by Lao Tzu. One of the phrases in there that I live by is to conquer others is to have power. To conquer yourself is to have strength.
Oh, excellent.
So,
I know you love quotes.
Yes. I have all my little mantras, Michael.
So, in the association community, we have our issues as well as our successes. if you could recommend a couple of things to the association community that you think would move them forward, give them extra energy, set their sights at the stars, what might those couple of things be?
Well, there's more than a couple, so I'll try to keep the list short. First of
Go
all,
for it.
I'm going to go for it, Michael. You've heard me say this in our private conversations over lunch and things like that. So I'm just going to share it with the world now. First of all, associations and nonprofits are not different. All 501c organizations are nonprofits because we are all incorporated under that section of the IRS code. So 501c, what matters is the number after that C. Now, that is, again, a call for unity within our profession and within our community. Because I have the CAE, which focuses on C6 and C4, and I have the CNP, which focuses on C3. These are the most common ones we have. And you know what I found? We have so much in common. The only thing that's different is a membership association versus a foundation or charity, because you don't have members necessarily in all of those models. But all of those models have in common, they're mission driven. They want to help make the world a better place. And they're focused on doing a certain thing and doing it well. Now, that's the other thing that we need to keep in mind. We don't have to be all things to all people. And we should focus on what we do well. Don't do 42 things when 5 are what's bringing people to the table. Focus on those 5. The other thing is we need to stand up and speak out about our profession as a unique profession. We're not doing that. People think we're busy bees. We're just little busy workers. We don't really know anything or do anything unique or special. I have calluses all over my tongue from biting it because I hear people make comments like, well, when I retire, I'll just go work at a nonprofit. So my response is, if that's a real job, I hope you understand that. Perhaps you'd be more interested in volunteering. So I think we need to do that. The other thing I would like to see us do is do more work in a united way to have better boards of directors or boards of trustees. We accept too often and for too long bad board behavior.
Boy, I couldn't agree with you more on that, as you know.
Yes.
That's one of my biggies. So in terms of individual executives, now I know you're a huge component of the CAE, but in addition to the CAE, if you were to recommend to a person wanting to move into the executive role, is there some particular body of knowledge in addition to receiving the certificate that you think would be extraordinarily helpful to them on their journey?
As they're getting ready for the CAE or
Yes.
after? Okay, so
after
the CAE, that's a great question. And I'm so glad you asked that. And no, audience, that was not a plant. But I am a huge proponent of the CAE because it does differentiate us. It makes us stand out. It shows that we understand our body of knowledge, which is our domains of practice. And it shows we're committed to our personal professional development. So when you're studying, you read the Principles and Practices of Association Management. That is a book that everybody should keep. Don't give it away after you pass the exam because the exam's just a thing you do along the way. What you want to do is keep up. It's what you do after you pass the exam. So you want to keep current with the PPAM, as we call it for short, so that every time a new edition comes out, buy it and read it. It refreshes your memory. It keeps you up to date. The other thing I would suggest, which is something we also suggest for studying for the exam itself, is to keep reading. Take 15 minutes a day and read the news or read our nonprofit management profession news regularly. Keep up with that and then understand how that applies. Because we need to understand what our domains of practice are. Because to my horror, when I was initially organizing study groups, I was approaching people I've known for years who have the CAE. And I said, hey, you want to mentor a study group? Oh, it's been so long since I took the test. I don't remember anything. I was shocked. And I was like, okay, this has to stop. So that's one of the reasons I started promoting the CAE so strongly and keeping up our education. And doing that. I also just find interesting books that are not specifically about nonprofit management. I would read books about productivity or books about thinking, I have a book on my desk called The Deliberate Thinker, because we have to practice thinking. We have to think about thinking, and nobody thinks about thinking, but it's hard work. And that's why it makes you tired. And that's probably why a lot of us don't do it. I mean, we've all asked that question. What were you thinking? I wasn't thinking. So there you go.
You and I have had the opportunity to put together a program called the Failed CEO, the Failed Executive. And for those people who haven't heard this before, both of us have found our way to the bottom of the pile as well as to the top. So what would you say to people who have, they've had a tough time of it. They've lost the job they loved or something like that, but they love this community. They want to work in the association, and they just, for either a reason of their own or because the board is crazy, are no longer in their position. You have something you tell those people who have, been at the top, got the hammer, and now they're starting again.
There is life after failure. And one of the things I talk about is we all talk about failure, but nobody talks about failure. And a lot of people are afraid to talk about the fact that they've lost a job, or they're afraid to admit that maybe they contributed to their own demise. And I think you and I know from experience, as hard as we tried, we probably in some way did contribute to our own demise. So what I would say is this: get everything in writing. Make sure that if you are going to be a CSE for the first time, that you have an attorney like the lovely Eileen Johnson help you with your contract before you sign it, because Eileen's very intuitive and she can pick up on things that you may not. You also want to protect yourself. But I will also tell you this: just because somebody signs an agreement doesn't mean they are going to keep it. So if you do find yourself in a legal tangle, don't approach it as an employment law situation. Approach it as a breach of contract, and you will probably get a resolution much more quickly. But if you have never been a chief staff executive, it is not the same as being a vice president. It is not the same as being the number two. It is all on you. So you need to be prepared for that, because you will have a network of people. Like I had a lot of people I could talk to when I was a chief staff executive, but they're not in the room with you when they're asking you questions. You are the CSE. That means there's only one of you. And that means you have to balance a lot of different pressures, relationships, and demands. So you need to be prepared for that. I thought I was prepared. I went in here. Here's another thing I tell people, Michael, and I think I've shared this with you before. I knew they were all wearing their Sunday best during the interview process, and I knew they were going to be naked on my first day of work. And I knew that, and I still got blindsided a couple times. So don't go into this thinking it's easy or that you know everything. One of the complaints that Michael and I hear a lot, especially from first-time chief staff executives, is our community has not prepared them for what it's really like. And that is a failure on our part. One of the reasons you mentioned it earlier, Michael, and you may have another question about it, but another web series I do called Nonprofit Executive Spotlight.
I did mention it earlier, which is a wonderful thing where you have the opportunity to highlight an individual who may be in a current position or looking for something new, or just, really doing an outstanding job, and we want an opportunity to show them off. It is a wonderful program that you do. Maybe you say a few things about it before we wrap up here.
Oh, great. Yes. A Nonprofit Executive Spotlight is what I call an occasional web series, because I only do it if somebody wants to be on. And it started in late 2020 when people started reporting in Nicola Rougeau's coffee chat that they were being laid off because of the lockdown. Entire membership departments being wiped out. Chief staff executives being shown the door for whatever reason. Boards panic easily. So a lot of people are losing their jobs. And there's also, unfortunately, a bias against us older folks for some reason. We're already trained, so please hire an older person. They won't ghost you, and they'll usually show up for work on time. But I started Nonprofit Executive Spotlight because that's the thing I can do. And that's an attitude I've always had in my life. What's the thing I can do to make it better? What's the thing I can do to help someone? I have a YouTube channel. I could start a series. I'm going to start a series, Nonprofit Executive Spotlight. And so what I do is people who are looking for their next job, let me know they'd like to be on. And we record a conversation. They talk about what their interest is, what kind of a organization they'd like to work with at some point. And then I give it to them, and they have something that shows their personality and their style and how articulate they are. And sometimes people are on more than once, because most people who've been on get a job. Whether or not they keep that job, we don't know. A lot of different factors come into play, as we both know the hard way. But that's why I do it. It's my public service to the community.
I think it's great, and you should be commended for it. So as we wrap up here, I have a kind of fast round just to have a little bit of fun as we wrap up. So I have no idea, one of the things people need to know, this is spontaneous, because Cecilia had no idea at all what I was going to ask.
That's right.
So it's been a lot of fun for me. So let's run through a few of these and see how we come out. So
Okay.
here's the first one: wine, beer, or scotch?
Scotch.
I should have known.
If I have a choice.
Yes. Texting or talking?
Talking.
Favorite city?
Ooh, that's a tough one, because you asked me. I would say probably my favorite city would be London. I'll say London.
Okay. Dusk or dawn?
Dusk.
Dusk. Place you most want to travel to?
Oh gosh, the place I most want to travel to. I've never seen the Grand Canyon.
Oh,
I would love to
beautiful,
see
by
that.
the way, if you haven't seen it. Just absolutely gorgeous. Yeah.
Okay.
Although the trip down is a little bit scary for us old folk. Favorite junk food?
Oh my gosh, my favorite junk food is potato chips.
Flavor of ice cream?
Chocolate.
Chocolate. And people
That's
don't
what
know that, but on the day we're recording this happens to be National Chocolate Ice Cream Day. Did you know that?
yes, I heard you say that earlier today, actually.
Cecilia, this has been a wonderful opportunity to share with everybody the 200th episode of Radio Free 501c. It's great that you've had the initiative to put this together. I enjoy being with you all the time. Hopefully, I enjoy being a part of the Rogue Tulips Network, and I'm hoping that others will have an opportunity to see this and join you and others in helping us ensure that we truly have a professional association career for people in our positions. Cecilia, thank you very much. Enjoy number 200.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you so much for guest hosting today. All right, everybody. Well, Michael and I have to go rogue for now, but Radio Free 501c will be back with episode 201 next week. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. And thank you again for watching, listening, or at least being aware of my podcast. Thank you.